Okay, welcome back. So, as I said in the last video, what we're going to do this time is to expand on how we might start to apply damage in a close quarter combat situation, and just have a little bit more of a look at the sort of critical hits thing that we left out in the last video. But before I go on, there was a bug in our close quarters function, which I kind of left in on purpose just to see if anyone picked it up, basically. And it's an interesting bug because it's one of those kinds of bugs that only evaluates some of the time. In fact, very rarely, but it can still kind of mess up your game, and it's therefore something that's good to be aware of. So you can see here I've got all these sort of results from our evaluation, our calling of the close quarters function. If I scroll up, there are one or two instances like this one here where there was no result. It evaluated the function ran, there was no error that threw up, but there was no result. It didn't say attacker wins or defender wins. So what do you think might have happened there? Well, if we look at this function here, which is the function that's calling the result, then you can see the problem. So it's actually here. So you can see if result is greater than agility and result is less than 2 times agility, print attacker wins. But what happens if the result is equal to the defender's agility? Because you can see if the attacker loses, then they have to roll less than the agility of the defender here. So we've got a less than agility and a greater than, but we haven't got an equal. So what happened here was the result, whatever it was, basically the dice result after all the modifications was exactly equal to the defender's agility, and therefore there was no result. So we need to make sure that doesn't happen in this instance. So what I'm going to say is, I think last time we said in order to win an attack, the attacking player has to roll above the agility of the defending player. So I'm just going to put equals in there and say that. So now what should happen is if the result is equal to or less than the defender's agility, then the defender will win, and that should avoid this little problem. So yeah, so there we go. So just something to be aware of. Anyway, let's move on. So the next thing we're going to think about is critical hits. So you notice in the last video we sort of did a placeholder for a function called critical hits, but we didn't do anything with it. So what I'm going to do is go def, and then I'm going to call this critical hits, brackets, and then return. Okay, so what you want to imagine is there's, if you score a critical hit, you want some extra stuff to happen that gives the attacker more of an advantage than if they just scored a normal hit. So we're not even doing damage yet. We're just modifying the results of the attack in order to make it more interesting if you score a critical hit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say crit equals dice again, but this time I'm going to set d equals 6. Okay, so we're going to use our dice function again. Now, and I'm also going to say, because I don't want to see the result, I'm going to say verbose equals false as well. So the dice function won't tell us what the result is, we'll just see the result in the game. So I'm going to say if crit is less than or equal to print, less than or equal to 2, do apologise, print, okay. And then I'm going to say, so you can imagine when you're designing a game like this, there are a whole bunch of things that could happen when you score a critical hit. So what kind of things might that be? So let's suppose you could, say, knock the weapon out of the defending player's hand, or you could knock them backwards and they fall over and they get stunned or something, or you could score double damage or something like that. So we're going to have a bunch of sort of randomly defined critical hits which only execute if the attacker scores a critical hit, but not if they just score a normal hit. So if we're saying, in this case, if crit is less than or equal to 2, so if you roll 2 or less on a d6, the crit will be weapon dropped. So later on in the game, I'm going to have one of the character attributes will be drawn weapon or weapon held. So it'll be the weapon that the character is currently holding. So weapon dropped, and then I'm going to say, of course, because it's always possible that the defending character isn't even holding a weapon, if no weapon held, then defending character is stunned. Okay. and we'll define what we mean by stunned and all the rest of it later on. But you can start to see where I'm going with this already. So crit, let's say if crit is equal to 3, I'll say print character is stunned. Okay. If crit is equal to, let's say, actually, I'm going to say, yeah, 4 for the moment. Slightly later programming, but I'm going to say character is stunned again. Stunned because I can't think of anything else right now. If crit is equal to that, print. Let's say bleeding wound inflicted. So in this instance, when a character gets a bleeding wound, they'll keep taking damage every turn from now on from this bleeding wound until they heal it. Basically, maybe they have a bandage or something they can, bandage it up. But it just creates more problems for the defending character. Now, you can also imagine that there are some characters in this game for which the concept of a bleeding wound doesn't quite make sense. So suppose you're fighting something that's, I don't know, undead or something like that. The idea of a bleeding wound might not sort of be meaningful. So I'll say if full stop there. In fact, if undead, then defender suffers double weapon damage. Say something like that. Okay, and then finally, if crit equals 6, the best result. Not that it matters because the odds of rolling a 6 are the same as any other number. Print, but you'll notice. So what I've done here is the severity of the crits that you can get I'm changing I'm sort of weighting the odds a bit. So if you roll, rolling a 1 or a 2, there's a 1 in 3 chance of rolling a 1 or a 2 on a d6. So there's a 1 in 3 chance that your crit will result in the defending character dropping their weapon. Okay. Then there's another 1 in 3 chance here, because we've got 3 and 4, that you'll stun the defending character. So there's a 2/3 chance or a 4 in 6 chance that you'll either stun the defending character or cause them to drop their weapon. So there's a very high chance they're going to get stunned, basically. But if you get really lucky, you might score a bleeding wound, or you might just go straight in and do double damage. Weapon hit points damage is double, something like that. Okay. Okay, so that, and then I'm going to return crit. So I'm going to so this function is going to return the result of this dice roll, basically. And so you can now see when we run this function here, the CQ function, if we score a crit, if I take this off now out of its comment, if we score a crit, it's going to go to this function here, and it's going to evaluate and produce a critical hit, basically. So I'll do that. I won't uncomment this bit yet. I'll just leave it for now. You'll see why later on. So if I do import game, then I'm going to say I've left close quarters and agility as they were in the previous video, just for reference. So game.cq, and then we'll say close quarters and agility bonus. We don't even need to define bonus because it's already defined. I think I turned it off. I turned it to 0. Yes, I did. I turned bonus to 0 in the last game, so I'm not going to bother with those this time. So here we go. So now when we run, if the attacker scores a critical hit, which they helpfully did this in this first roll, then it says attacker wins, critical hit scored, weapon dropped. If no weapon held, then defending character is stunned. So you can see. Do it again, attacker wins, normal hit. This time they scored a bleeding wound, so they're doing pretty well. They've scored 2 critical hits, bleeding wound again, attacker wins, defender wins, bleeding wounds, etc. So, so now we've got a bit more variety, and now we've stunned the defending character as well, bleeding wound again. The attacking character is doing quite well here. But you can see now that there's a bit more of a variety, which happens every time your active character rolls on a close quarter attack, basically. Okay, excuse me. So, what about damage? How about damage? So, what we've got a function here which evaluates whether a critical hit's been scored. We've got a function which rolls a dice. We've got a function which does close quarter combat and works out which character wins, which character loses. What we don't have yet is anything which works out what kind of damage the defending character might receive. so what I'm going to do is have another function. So this is where we're going to start defining damage. So I'm going to say def damage. Okay, I'm going to. So when you're playing a game like this, you can imagine there are a few attributes and a few things we're going to have to take into account here to think about how much damage might be caused by one character to another in close quarters. So you're going to think about probably the physical strength of the attacking character. So damage will only the damage function will only execute in the event of a successful hit. But you can imagine, you know, a really strong character with a drawing pin is still going to do quite a lot of damage. If you've got a really weak character with a drawing pin, the weak character is going to do less damage. So you want some sort of strength attribute that's going to be taken into account with damage, you know. So why a drawing pin, I don't know, but there we go. So I'm going to put strength as one of the attributes. It's also going to depend on whether they've got a drawing pin or a sword or a battle axe or something else as well. So I'm going to put weapon. There we go. So no drawing pins. You can imagine that if the attacking character might be casting something like a spell, for example, which might do more damage, or the weapon they're using might have an enchantment which does more damage, something like that. So I'm going to put magic in here. You can also imagine the defending character might have some armor or some other means of defending themselves, which gives them some level of protection against incoming damage. So I'm going to put armor in here as well. We're going to need that. And then I'm going to I think I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm going to say verbose equals true as well, and leave the rest for now. So we'll work on the rest some other things in a minute. But right, so I'm going to say, let's see if hit point damage equal to. Now the maths I'm going to use here. I'm going to say I want the combat in this game to be fairly quick. So what I don't want is, you know, as it's a text-based game, you don't want to be having tons and tons and tons of rounds of combat where you're just bashing away and it kind of gets boring. I kind of want the combat to be fast, so maybe only a few rounds. And you can imagine this is kind of closer to reality, because if two people are fighting each other, you know, one's got a battle axe and one's got a double-edged handed sword or something, either one of them scoring a good hit might end the combat straight away. So, you know, you don't have to design your game this way, but this is how I'm going to do this one, just to sort of, you know, give you a flavour of the kinds of things we're working with. So I'm going to say strength over 4. I want to have the majority of the damage be caused by the weapon the character is holding, rather than the physical strength of the character themselves. So you know, even if the character is really, really strong, if they haven't got a weapon, I don't want them to be able to cause, you know, as much damage as a much weaker character which still is wielding a sword or something like that. So I'm going to say plus weapon, plus magic, plus I think I'll leave that, yeah, and then minus armor, basically. Okay, so a few things to think about here. Now, with our game, we want to work in whole numbers. We want to work in integers. So you can imagine if character's strength is, say, 53, 53 divided by 4 is 13.25. We don't want that. What we want is an integer number. So I'm going to put int before this result. So what I'm saying is I want the result of this to be expressed in integer whole numbers only. I don't want the 0.25 after the end of it. So now, if you can see it here, if I just run this in our console window here, 53 over 4, this time it's just 13 rather than 13.25. So it's a more usable number for our purposes. Okay, I am now going to have a go to see if this works. So save, import game. Right, so let's say magic. Let's suppose we haven't got any magic and we haven't got any armor either for the moment. Oh no, I'll keep armor. So I'll say, it's actually, yeah, I'll keep this. So I'll say magic, comma, armor. Now, one thing in Python which you might not have come across yet is you can actually assign multiple values to multiple variables in one line of code. So in this case, I'm going to assign 2 separate numbers to the 2 separate variables in one line. So instead of doing 2 lines, I can do it in 1. So I'll say magic is 0. I'll say armor is 5. So in this instance, the armor is going to save 5 damage. 5 of the damage points is going to be absorbed by the armor. I'm also going to say weapon is weapon, so weapon is equal to, say, I don't know, 15, something like that. So what we're saying here is magic is 0, armor is 5, weapon is 15. So the order of the numbers you specify after the assignment sign is the order in which they get applied on the left-hand side. So we do that. Okay. So if I say return HP damage here, save. Okay, I'm just going to import game again. Right, so game damage. Let's see if this works. Oops, excuse me. What's missing? Magic armor. Type error 4 missing required. Ah, right. Okay. Of course it does. Yes, I haven't put any positional arguments in. Silly me. So we're going to say strength. Yeah, I really must stop doing that. Weapon. Magic. Nobody's perfect. Armor. There we go. Right. Strength is not defined, isn't it? Oh no, it's not. No, you're right, it isn't defined. Strength is equal to, so let's say the strength of the character is, I don't know, 35. Okay, so there we go, 18. So 18 damage done. Okay. Now there's no randomness in this one, so if I do this again, it's going to just do 18 damage each time. So what you could do if you want to, I'm not going to do it in this one, but what you could do is you could put, say, brackets around here, for example, and then multiply by some random number function here, just to make it a bit more variable each time you do the attack. But I'm not going to do that in this instance. But you could do that if you want to, you know, add a bit more sort of random flavour to your game. Okay, let's see. Now, something else to think about is, let's suppose in our game we're not just going to have characters that attack each other at close quarters. We're going to have characters that can do ranged attacks as well. So they can be able to fire a bow or crossbow or sling or whatever, or throw something. So you can imagine that the way that damage might work when a character is shooting at somebody is going to be a little bit different from the way the damage works when they are attacking someone at close quarters. So you can imagine that you know, the strength in a shooting attack or a ranged attack isn't perhaps going to be quite as important as it is in a close quarters attack. Because you can imagine, you know, if you're swinging a sword or something, your physical strength is going to have some determination to how much damage you do with that sword. But if you're firing a bow and arrow, then, you know, it's really a matter of the impulse, the force that the bow imparts to the arrow that's really responsible for the damage. So we want the game to understand whether you're doing an attack that's at close quarters or at long or at range. So what I'm going to do is add a couple more keyword arguments here. So I'm going to say ranged equals false, and I'm going to say projectile equals none. Save. And now I'm going to set up two little logical arguments here. So I'm going to say if ranged is equal to false, so it's a close quarter attack, then do this. Okay, and I'm going to say if ranged equals true, then we're going to do something a bit different. HP damage, again, still going to be damage, but this time we won't have a strength part to this. We won't have a strength part, it's just going to be weapon. So we're going to say weapon plus magic again, plus, and then what I'm going to do is say projectile. Okay, projectile, and I think I'm going to leave it, oh yeah, minus armor of course as well. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm basically saying, alright, so you can imagine that the damage that might be caused by a bow and arrow, say when you're firing it, is a function both of the inherent power of the bow, the force that the bow can impart to the arrow, and the kind of arrow that you're firing as well. So if you look at sort of, you know, pictures of medieval weapons, for example, and you look at sort of pictures of different arrowheads, there's like broadheads, there's bodkin arrows, there's sort of thin shaft arrows. The arrowheads could be made of different materials like flint or iron, steel, or whatever, obsidian perhaps. So you know, your damage is going to be a function both of the weapon that's firing the projectile and the projectile itself. So if I save that, let's suppose that I'm just going to say that for the sake of argument, my projectile damage is going to be 6, and I'm going to say my weapon, let's say it's a longbow or something is 12, so it does 18 damage, say, and I'm going to say armor is 5 again. Okay, right. So if I now do game dot damage, and I'm going to say projectile equals projectile. Let's put everything in the right order, shall we? So I'm going to put, so we want strength in here. We're still going to put strength in, even though it's not going to evaluate for a ranged attack. But it's still the code still requires strength because it's a positional argument. You could, if you want to figure out a way to take that out in the event of a ranged attack, you can do so as a sort of little side exercise. Doesn't really matter. Weapon and magic and armor. And I think, oh, I'm going to say ranged equals true as well, because it defaults to false in the code. 13. There you go. So our ranged attack did 13 damage. So let's see if that works. So yes, it does, doesn't it? So our projectile does 6 damage. The weapon itself does 12 damage. So that's 18. But the armor saves 5 damage. So the actual damage that's done to the character is 13. So you can start to see how, you know, the different sort of numbers and so on that we assign to the different characteristics can start to have an impact on the way the game is played, which is kind of useful. So, you know, if we changed our weapon, let's say we have a much more dangerous projectile that does 10 damage, say, and then gain damage, now it's doing 17 damage, so, you know, that's working, that's quite nice. If I say range is false, oops, excuse me, didn't mean to do that, let's say range is false, 15. So now now it's using strength again. We define strength up here somewhere, strength 35. So strength, weapon, magic is still 0, armor again. But if I do strength, okay, so strength is 35. So let's do strength over 4 is 8 because we're doing integer. Plus, what was it? The weapon damage was 12, so 8 plus 12 is 20, and then yeah, the armor was 5, wasn't it? So 20 minus 5 is 15. Yeah, so you can see it's working. It's working for both a sort of ranged attack and a non-ranged attack. Okay, so what we're going to do now is, let's see, what we're going to do now is we want our close quarters to call the damage code. We want the when we do our close quarter attack, we want it to say, if I score a hit, then I want to apply damage to the defending character. So what I'm going to do here is, if I'm going to take the winning condition here and say attacker wins, and in damage, before I go any further, I'm going to say print, and then I'm going to say HP damage caused, something like that, caused, there we go. Yes, so quick check, save, run again, port game, yeah, 15 caused, 15, oh, actually let's say 15 damage caused, there we go. Right, okay, okay, so in fact, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. Let's take that out. Let's take that out. Right, we'll see why in a minute. Okay, so in the event of a successful close quarter attack, we want the code to call the damage function. So I'm going to say damage, and then I need to specify strength and weapon and magic and so on. So you can see that if I just put strength and weapon, magic, etc. here, this isn't going to work because I haven't specified what the strength and the weapon and the magic would be in the close quarters argument, in the close quarters code.